Welcome to the Parent Equation podcast with me, Aisha Murray. This podcast series is full of inspiring stories from working parents who are passionate about designing a life that works for them and their families. Working parents like you who want a purposeful, rewarding career alongside a balanced family life. Welcome to this episode of The Parent Equation, which is the last in season 2 before we break for summer. So I'm very happy to have a co-host today in the form of Parisa Wright. And Parisa is the founder of Greener and Cleaner. Welcome, Parisa.
Thank you. Hi there. Thanks for having me.
And our guest today is Paul Ready, who is an actor and a parent. And this subject today around eco-anxiety is very close to his heart. So welcome, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So to kick off, I suppose a question for you, Paul. Did becoming a parent change your perspective on climate change?
I think it's changed a lot, my perspective, although it's not like I suppose my awareness of the situation we are in has got, deeper and deeper as I've done more reading around it and, and just looking at the world and seeing what's happening. But I think before I had kids, it was definitely a kid, before I had a kid. It was definitely in my thinking already because, so 2016, so my kid's 6, or 6.5 as she likes to make sure I know.
It's very important, that half.
Yeah, and now she's going to start marking the 3/4 and the quarters. It's just any excuse, really. But, when I was talking to my wife about having kids, when we were talking, one of our conversations was about like the future, because I think, and that was the environmental future, because there were, even before 2018, was it, when the big protests started, even then there was this dialogue, this narrative about like the planet is heading for, a very dangerous situation. So it was in my thinking then, but but anyway, we decided to have a kid, and we were lucky to be able to have a kid, and wouldn't change it for the world. But I suppose, has it changed? I suppose it's up the stakes for me. But how that plays out in my life, because it has up the stakes, but the stakes are so huge that, working out, and not just so huge, they're so confusing. There's the narrative around it is so confusing. But yeah, I couldn't. I think when the big protests happened in 2018, that was a real wake up call for me.
I think you're right in saying that the stakes are so high, and as a parent, it becomes hugely overwhelming. We have everything else we're dealing with as parents anyway, just the normal things we all have to struggle with every day, juggle with. And then we have these stakes on top, which I suppose for normal parents, as we all are, in your experience, Paul, how do we try and bring out, I suppose, diffuse some of that overwhelm so we can actually start to make a difference every day?
That's a huge. That's huge. I suppose to balance it out, I think what I would say for myself is, I think the line of work that I'm working in anyway deals with quite epic stories. These are the epic stories that make drama, that make tension, and there's a whole range of films at the moment which are, man, woman surviving against, it's been a story surviving against the beast, just surviving against, evil superheroes, and also surviving against climate. And it's this is a story we tell, and we've told for probably centuries. So I think sometimes I have to really step back to step away from the overwhelm, because I think from the place of overwhelm, you can't do anything. And I think I certainly have been through periods of being entirely overwhelmed. I mean, still, if I read an article, I read many articles, and when I've read one of those articles, maybe about, wildfires, raging in Canada at the moment, or, ice melt, or, whatever. There's a lot of very heavy articles out there. Like, it's very difficult. My temper gets very short after those. Just like, if you catch me in the wrong moment, because it's so, I'm like, how the hell do I deal with that? What I've just read. I think, and I think you can't. I mean, I think I'd put the question back to both of you. Like, how would you ever? How do we deal with this? Like, the gravity of this.
I was going to ask, and I suppose feed in that, like Paul, I guess my light bulb moment was also 2018, when the children were doing the school climate strikes and the Fridays for the Future, and you would see images on television or down the high street of 5-year-olds or 15-year-olds putting aside effectively their childhoods in order to beg us adults to do something. And that for me as well was definitely the wake-up call of, my God, how can I be part of, be somebody who I feel is reasonably compassionate, reasonably intelligent, and yet we're in this situation where children are having to do that and I'm not doing enough. And I think for me, what helped me was with the overwhelm was like going, right, where can I start? And I think identifying that a lot of the people who weren't engaging were seeing it as something far away, something about polar bears, something about, a third world country that wasn't relevant to them, and trying to help them find ways that it was relevant to them, but also like practical things they could do. And I think for me, helping my family take steps and then helping have a wider impact by helping other people by setting up the charity so that they could know what they could do in a practical way, with some hand holding, but also like really sharing like real life examples from local people who were like them. That's what I found helped me deal with it. And if I'm honest, sometimes I just can't watch the news. Like, I have to have periods of time where I try not to watch the news and I just try and focus on what I'm able to do. But I mean, it is useful to have those external voices to go, actually, don't focus on recycling, look at who your energy provider is, or look at how you're traveling. But then once you've got that information about how you can make impact, I think having that information and then being able to do things is really powerful for me in terms of dealing with my anxiety. And I don't know if you found that, Paul, that some of the steps that you've been able to take, that, okay, they don't solve that anxiety. We've still got those fires burning. But every time you find a new way of having an impact, whether that is something in your own home or getting involved in something locally, or, talking to a politician or whatever it is, that sort of like soothes the soul a bit, I think, and helps deal with that anxiety, because you're not being held for ransom entirely by politicians and businesses who don't care. You are able to take some steps and then sort of collaborate with others to have more impact. I don't know what you think about that, Paul.
I think, the fact is, there are people, including yourself, doing extraordinary things, and within the industry I work in as well. So I suppose one of the things I can do is kind of, with my little bit of I wouldn't call it fame, but my little bit of being known, is sometimes get behind some ideas that can help them get out there a bit more. So I find that is, like, for example, in the industry I'm working in, Equity are working on something called a green rider. So the green rider which is something I'm definitely going to get behind. The Green Rider is what any actor can do to, in conversation with the producers who are also behind the idea, to make requests to lower their impact. So, I did a film in Europe, a few places in Europe, and I was able to ask them if I could not fly and take trains instead, trains and ferries, it turned out. And most of the time, when this was a Netflix show, and I think when they've got money, they can do that. Although I also worked on a very low budget film recently in Ireland, and they were also very happy to get me there by ferry and train. There's always something you can do personally, but apart from the stuff I've done in my life, which is not a vegan. I've tried to be a vegan, but I eat a lot more vegan food. The way I travel, I'm mainly local, really, as far as I travel around on my bike, to get the shopping and, whatever, an electric bike, which is I'm lucky to be able to afford that. But I make a lot of choices. So, I try and grow some vegetables. I've got some outdoor space. But most of the things I take, actually, most of the choices I make with our family make me feel better anyway. Not just about facing the climate. They actually make me feel healthier and make me feel more connected in a way.
Absolutely.
I think with kids, it's so important to get them on this journey early and make it enjoyable for them. So I know with mine, it's little things like they put the recycling out. It's just a small job, but they understand why it's happening. They're part of that process every week. Or taking my cycling to trampolining with my little girl right past your house, Paul, every Monday.
Yeah, okay, great.
And she loves cycling, so why wouldn't we do that as opposed to jump in the car? Because she loves it. It's a shared experience then. I love watching her little bum jiggle up and down in front of me on the bike. I think it's the most adorable thing in the world. So that just brings me joy anyway. And it is doing something towards this great big subject we're talking about. So I think it's how can we involve them, tap into their passions as young people?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it feels then it's a shared family goal that I enjoy being part of rather than this overwhelmed chore, I should be doing more kind of feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And my kid too, I don't know where she got the idea. Somewhere she got the idea to collect litter on the way to school. She did it once, and that's probably her I've done that now. But it was wherever that came from. It was beautiful. I mean, I think she thinks our house is a tip. Often she'll say your bedroom is a disgrace. So maybe she just wants a tidier world, but for whatever reason, great.
And then, Parisa, a lot of the inspiration I get from my day-to-day management of this overwhelm crisis is when you came onto my podcast last year and talked about normalizing all of this. And actually, just doing something is better than nothing. So I suppose, could you maybe speak to that a little bit, just to kind of maybe recap on some of the things you talked about, which I think is so important to revisit in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, interestingly, I think Paul kind of nailed it, which is you can take steps in your own household and you can use your different spheres of influence. So that can be at work, that can be a PTA, that can be a residents association, that can be a church group, that can be a gymnastics club, your bridge club, whatever it is. And you can make changes there. So even if you have councillors or MPs who are uninterested because they don't think it's a vote winner yet, or whatever the reason, or you feel that, the people who are interested are hampered by those who aren't, you can still make changes that have an impact. You don't need to feel held for ransom by the system kind of thing. And I think also what was interesting about what Paul said was there's a lot of people who feel that they'll be judged if they say, but I've only cut down my meat, or we now do 2 veggie meals a day, but we're not, a week, but we're not vegan, or we still have a car. Or actually, I really think people need to get away from this idea of the people who don't want you to change will bandy around words like hypocrite and not good enough. But the people who genuinely want change, like, I don't care. Like, by being alive and having a child, you could arguably say I'm a hypocrite, but I'd much rather be a hypocrite doing something than be a horrible person doing nothing and just trying to tear everyone down and just happy to see the world burn, basically, or going, it's too late. I'd much rather be doing something. And I think we've just got to make people brave to go, okay, I'm going to try this thing, I'm going to try that thing. And when it comes to food and transport and all this stuff, I'm not perfect. I founded and set up this sustainable living charity, but I still eat some meat. But we've just massively reduced our meat consumption. So, like, we eat half the amount of meat or less than we used to eat. And we save a lot of money that way, but we try and use some of that money to make sure that the meat that we eat is ethical, so it's organic. So we try and, like, do what we can with the meat that we are going to have. We try and eat more vegetables and fruit and, other alternatives. And like Paul said, we try and grow some stuff locally or support local allotments and local farms by buying locally, buying seasonally, that sort of thing. And again, with car, Paul is an inspiration to me, honestly. He's got a cargo bike and he goes around with his daughter. And I think that is amazing, considering this borough where we are based is pretty pro car and anti anything else. It doesn't feel entirely safe. And I would love to feel safe enough to cycle around, like, given what I do. And I've given up my career of 20 years last year as a lawyer to focus on this full time, because for me, there's nothing more important I can do with my skills than try and get everyone on board and everyone involved and feeling they can do something. But yeah, it's essentially do what you can. So we still have a car. We just use it a hell of a lot less than we used to. People are like, why don't you have an electric? Well, actually, we have a hybrid car. We only use it once every week, once every 2 weeks. We just use public transport. We walk the rest of the time, and if I felt brave enough, I'd cycle as well. But yeah, essentially at the moment, if I had an electric vehicle, I would probably use the car a lot more. That would mean there'd be more congestion, more other people sitting in cars. I would be modeling the behavior of it's good to be in a car for a 2-minute journey, which I don't think it is. And I think that the people who are disabled, the people who are elderly, the people who have heavy shopping, people who have 6 kids and need a car, those are the people who need to be prioritized for using the roads. And those of us who are healthy enough to walk and cycle, let's just do that more. I'm not saying give up the car. I haven't given up the car, but, just do it less. Same with meat, do it less. Same with energy. Okay, you can't have solar panels. Maybe you can't afford an air source heat pump. I know I can't. What I can do is make my home more energy efficient. So it's about finding those practical steps to start on your journey rather than thinking it has to be perfect. Because quite frankly, if someone came to me and said, I literally can't do anything with my life, I can't change anything in my life, but I can write emails, I'd be like, literally, the most powerful thing you can do is write to your councillor, write to your MP, and tell them that you want changes to make it easier for you to make those changes that you can't afford now, whether that's making your home more energy efficient, whether that is cycling and walking instead of being in a car, whether that is the way that you bank, whether all of those things, we really need the support of our government and of businesses to make those changes. So if you did nothing else, but you just worked out for the first time in your life who your councillors and your MPs are, who the big brands are that you want to buy from but don't seem to be changing, and talk to them, you can make a big difference. So looking at energy, looking at transport, looking at food, looking at buying less stuff we quite frankly don't need. We buy more clothes per person than any other European country. And traditionally pre-loved or secondhand has had a stigma attached to it, but now it's one of the highest booming industries is pre-loved clothing, and like Vinted and all of these sites have done brilliant things for that. But like really thinking about whether you need that new item, because clothing industry, it creates it's the second biggest polluter after fossil fuels, second biggest waster of water after agriculture. So it is a real problem for the world how much clothing we go to through, going from like 2 or 4 seasons a year to 24 seasons a year in shops like, H&M and Primark and all that sort of stuff. That's sort of pressing on people's insecurities to make them feel like they constantly need to buy stuff they don't need, 70% of which tends to be made of plastics anyway because it's polyester, etc. I think it's just thinking about changing and making changes in impactful areas rather than having to be perfect. I think that's what I would say to people. And yeah, I'm not perfect. Paul's not perfect. We're just human beings trying our best. And I'd much rather be that than be too scared to do anything and leave my kids to a horrible future without at least giving it a go of protecting them.
You ruined my illusion now. I thought you're both perfect. So never mind.
Yeah, I did before I came on this. So, well, what a way to find out.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about community, maybe, unless Paul, you had something to add there.
I did, because I think there's I think what Prissy, what you're so amazing at is making action seem possible. And I think there's a couple of things I'd say about it, and I'll probably get lost on the way to saying them. But when I was talking about overwhelm, it's very like it's taking a step right back. The human being, this conscious creature, the conscious creature who's conscious of their own mortality. I don't know any other creature that is. We might find there in the future. We might find so, but like what that does to the subconscious and the choices we make in our life, which is something I'm interested in, like as an actor, as this kind of this storyteller. We might. These are not my ideas. I read a book called, what's it called? The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, an incredible book, who said, we can't possibly live with the idea of our mortality on a day-to-day basis. It's too overwhelming. And so what we do is we make choices. And he said at some point, like, we take as big a bite of life as we feel comfortable with. So that might mean we have a family and we work in a particular job that's as secure as we can make it. It could mean anything. I mean, I've chosen to be not secure. I've chosen to be an actor, and there's a writer's strike coming up, so God knows when I'm going to work again. But anyway, that's my chunk. That's my bite of life, and the bite of life is in position to mortality. So talking and thinking about the climate crisis, which is an existential crisis, is terrifying. And I think, of course, it's what do you do standing in front of that? Do you deny it and go, it's all nonsense? Or do you live a hedonistic life? Do you kind of try and do something about it, like you, Parisa? It's a big question. What do we do in the face of our mortality? And actually, that is what, I suppose, that's what majorly we're talking about. Step back. And I think where I come down when I'm not being overwhelmed, where I come down is I have hope, but I think hope can't be empty. So the only way you can have hope for me, and again, this is not my idea. This is like, I don't know who said it, but maybe Rebecca Solnitz or something. There's only hope in action. And I think because if you're not doing anything, then I think you're left to the mercy of the feeling of being left to the mercy and powerless is no good for your mental health apart from anything else. So I think that's what you show to me, Parisa. Hope in action.
Thank you.
And I think that applies to life in general, actually, not just climate, obviously, but any action. We all have a choice to make. We all have a choice around the emotions we choose to have today, the path we're going to take, the conversations we're going to have, the decisions we're going to make. It's all our choice.
Totally.
And giving ourselves that hope, because we know we've got agency over not everything in our lives, by all means, but we have agency in the life we are creating, in this sort of these small little bubbles, and as Prue said, the spheres of influence we have. So that choice and that intentional choice is vital.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's talk about community, because I think obviously we are very lucky, the three of us, because we live quite close together, which is nice.
Okay.
Hence why this conversation is happening. And from a community point of view, I suppose, how can we, I suppose, feel less isolated in this hope, in this action we're trying to take, but in our small bubbles, our small families? How can we get behind the community spirit more, so we feel less isolated, we can do more together. Parisa, maybe you can start, or Paul.
I think Parisa will have to start on this.
I don't know. Well, like we said before, there are different spheres of influence. So you can, and I know amazing women who've done this. They've set up little green teams in the PTA at school, or they've set up little green teams at their church. Actually, amazing men who've done that as well. Have set up amazing green teams at their church group. Their church. They've set up green teams in residents' associations. That is really nice, because when you set up something like that, it brings out of the woodwork people who are interested. And it may be that they're interested just in flowers or just in trees, or they might be interested in energy, or they might be interested in, cycling or walking or whatever it is. But it doesn't matter, because it's all part of the same puzzle, and everyone brings their different skill sets. But it's just that you have each other's backs, and you can talk to each other, and you can feel heard, and, you don't feel like you're sort of screaming in the wind on your own kind of thing, which is really amazing. And then on top of that, when I was on maternity leave and I was watching those strikes, I really liked a lot of the online sort of social media, Facebook groups and other groups where they were like Zero Waste London, or different groups where you could sort of learn things, but also just see other people's stories and hear that other people are in the same boat and worried about it and trying different things. The thing that I think I got a lot out of that. But at the end of it, I decided to set up my own thing, because I felt like there was a problem with siloing. I think a lot of those Facebook groups and even some charities are very focused on just air pollution, or just veganism, or just reducing consumption, or just energy. And I just felt like actually it all has to be talked about in the round. You kind of need a one-stop shop place where anyone can come with any question, and then there'll be someone else from the community who knows the answer to that. Not everyone, but someone will know. And so I ended up setting up a Facebook sort of group, a community group called Greener and Cleaner, and it grew from like 20 people meeting above a pub once a month to about 3,000 people within about 3 months or something, and now it's 7,500 people online. And we have a lot of people who share their stories of what they're doing, ask questions, ask for advice, signpost funding, signpost awesome events going on. And we, from the very beginning, were putting on 2 events a month, and all of those were led by local people going, oh, I've got this skill. Oh, I can show you how to prune a tree. Oh, I can show you how to, sew a reusable gift bag, or whatever it was, which was wonderful. And now we've set up a community hub in our shopping centre, which is basically the natural evolution of this, a mainstream setting, so that even people who are not on social media, which a lot of people aren't, depending on their age, depending on what they're interested in, can just walk by and go, oh, actually there, I can ask a question, because it is overwhelming. There's so much information. There's so many areas you could change in. It's so much nicer to go to somebody who, is a local resident and say, look, where can I start? Or I've done this, but what should I do next? And for someone to go, you know what, if you're going to focus on anything, look at these 3 things. And the easiest thing to do in those 3 things is X, Y, and Z. And just to give you a starting point, so that you're seeing you're not alone. You're seeing who you can collaborate with. You can volunteer your time. You can give your examples. You can lead a workshop. But also, you've got that sort of hand holding of, when you have a child for the first time and everyone's telling you, if you do this, they'll die. If you do this, they'll die. If you do this, they'll die. And if you're a parent and you're dealing with climate anxiety now, it's a bit like that when you look online, because you're like, sugar, there are so many different things I could be or should be doing. And and online can be like really overwhelming for that. And I think having a physical space to go to and actually talk to a human being and go, well, this is my situation. And I definitely can't afford no EV or solar panels. So what can I do? Or whatever your situation is. And having a human being talk to you, I think, is really powerful. So what we're trying to do is create a blueprint for these to roll out across the UK, because I believe every community should be able to have one. And there are amazing transition town movements. There are amazing climate hubs that are trying to do similar things. They have certain issues. So we're trying to help deal with those issues, to help those people who are running those hubs through research that we're doing. But ultimately, whatever the model, I just think communities helping each other, sharing their knowledge locally and sharing their examples locally, that's the answer, because then no one feels alone. Everyone knows there's somewhere they can go 5 days a week for support, or to learn the skills they need, whether that's sewing or insulating their home or growing vegetables. It's free because it's run by the community and it's a charitable thing. So I think there's lots of ways of getting involved. You don't have to go to the extreme of what I did. But you can push for something like that in your community. You can support something like that in your community. You can reach out to our charity for advice. But also, as I said, think about what are your spheres of influence. Is that like helping setting up a green team in your PTA or in your church group or at your, I don't know, cycling club? You know, and maybe going from there. I think that's a really good way of engaging with community.
It also sounds like it's completely, well, it's completely free of judgment.
Yeah.
Which
exactly.
social media is not.
Yeah, that's
so as
true.
soon as you put yourself into that social media space, there is judgment coming at you from all angles. You can't really say anything without being.
I mean, we do have
judgment.
quite strict judgment-free rules on our site, because that was another thing that worried me about what I saw on some of those zero waste sites or whatever, not just zero waste sites, but different Facebook groups where someone would say, look, I can't get my husband off Coca-Cola. Is it better for him to have 2-litre bottles in plastic or aluminium cans? And 50% of the comments are people saying it's disgusting that you're having those chemicals, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't help anyone. That means that woman's probably never going to ask a question again and will just shut herself off and just go, well, you know, it really, judgment doesn't help anyone, whether that's people judging on food or cars or whatever it is. I think conversation and sharing examples of how practically people have managed some of the obstacles we all have, I think that's what's helpful. And, you know, giving people the time to come to each of these different solutions in their own time, I think is really important. So I think, yeah, judgment-free zones really important.
Absolutely. And Paul, what do you think on that community angle then? So where does your involvement?
Yeah, I mean, I like other people to have ideas and me go, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Fair enough.
No, I mean, I think, you know, I do come up with a bunch of ideas, but I don't ever feel like I have the, I haven't yet found, I'm still working on like how to get them implemented. So at the moment, well, I don't know. I was going to say, you know, I love the idea of those big green weeks, but I'm yet to go. And I always go, oh, I could make a massive big green week in the community, but I still go like, okay, where do I start? You know, but on small scale, I mean, the conversation around this has moved incredibly in like 3 years, like, or 5 years. Like, it was. And again, I think that's because of the protests and actually bringing it to light. But you know, before that time, you could feel like something is off and something is wrong, and then there definitely isn't anywhere to go with that. But now, I mean, it's in every day. I don't, you know, every day I will hear something about it. I'll see changes happening. And whether that's people working in silos or not. I mean, I think I've worked in a silo because I didn't know quite where to go, or like who to get behind. You know, even Extinction Rebellion, when they started, I was like, yes, I felt reluctant to get involved, although I backed the idea. I mean, I'm not going to go into now why I felt reluctant, but there was something was stopping me there. But it's like people say now, you know, I was speaking to someone the other day, those just stop oil idiots kind of thing. But you know, I don't have a judgment for just stop oil, because I think, you know, they see the extremity of what we're facing, and then that's their method of like trying to make an impact. But I just think there are so many. What I've learned is there are so many different groups. There's Parisa and the Hub. There is Equity Equity again have been working on getting pensions out of fossil fuels, and so that, you know, lots of actors have their equity pension. And then there's the Green Rider. Then there's people doing so much. I just think I think one of the things is getting beyond fear and just turning up.
Right.
You know, and like me getting beyond fear because like, you know, sometimes I'm Kevin from Motherland. You know, like you know, if I'm in certain company, like I'm Kevin from Motherland and I'm out, and I don't necessarily like the attention. So sometimes it's getting beyond fear, you know.
No, I totally agree with you. And another amazing organisation that I'm sure you come across is also Julie's Bicycle, who also work with a lot of organisations in the arts. But what I was going to say, I thought what was interesting is that when Julie's talking about community and we're talking about engaging the community, actually theatre is exactly that, right? Theatre, by definition, is a brilliant way of engaging communities. And I think that actually you're selling yourself short, because I think you say you don't want to lead or come up with great ideas. Actually, you've come up with lots of great ideas, and
I just haven't done anything.
You have followed through, actually, because like if you remember, you told me about a piece of work that you're doing, which is a piece of theatre kind of aimed at that sort of community, sort of starting conversations and community.
Yes.
There's two projects that you're working on, one which is more storytelling, one which is maybe a bit more theatrical but experiential, which are both, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about those, but they sound like an amazing way that an actor, a writer could reach out to their community, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of storytelling is really powerful, and I think it's partly why I was attracted to it, because I've been influenced by stories, and I love playing different characters. So on two levels, I think part of the reason I enjoy what I do and researching a character and trying to play as different characters as I can takes a mindset of empathy, because you have to not judge. I've played Kevin, who actually, I try not to judge. I did judge for a long time, because I was like, get your stuff together. I wanted to say, get your shit together. And that's what I meant. Get your shit together, Kevin. And it took me a while not to judge him. But I've also played, psychopaths who have very little reason to like, but I've got to find an understanding. So I think theatre is really, and storytelling is really great for that, for bringing people together and challenging and celebrating humanity, and asking questions. Obviously, my wife works at the Globe. She's the artistic director of the Globe, also a brilliant actor, but she does the work she programs is really exciting in that way, and the Globe is a very democratic space, because you can see everybody. There's no tricks really to it. It's all about storytelling, and it's often very, very powerful. And people can feel really affected and included, and also many, many things. When lockdown happened, I was wondering what to do, and I've always played with writing, but I couldn't call myself a writer, although I have written this piece. So I was working on a monologue. I was thinking, what can I do for about the climate? And because obviously I had a lot of feelings going on, and lockdown kind of gave a bit of space to that. And so I wrote a monologue about one area of climate change, because the problem is, when I did about 17, 18 drafts of this, and it started somewhere and ended up somewhere completely different, because there's so many. You can't talk about the whole of climate change in one thing. You have to have an in. And I think my in was, I think ultimately it's about consumerism. So it was like telling a story from somebody very much in our society, in a Western consumer society, and their journey within that. So yeah, I did. I suppose that's one way I can use the skills, or investigate. investigate this very troubling subject.
But you're absolutely right, isn't it? In that example, you've played to your strengths. You know, the industry you're in, your storytelling ability, obviously ability to write.
Yes.
So you're using something which you know you can do to share, to provide insight, information, etc. So I suppose for us, it's what are our strengths as individuals?
Right.
How can we exploit our strengths to get the message out there in a different way to yours? I'm not a writer, so I won't do it through writing or through theatre, but there'll be, you know, I talk to working parents every single day. So how can I encourage conversations with them just organically, naturally? And of course, Parisa has an actual tangible action vehicle in Greener and Cleaner. So we all have strengths. We all have these things which are innate. We don't really understand them probably enough. So how can we exploit those, I think, to share this message?
Talking is incredibly important, like talking about this, because for many reasons, and I think, you know, especially if someone feels like isolated, like to be able to open up a conversation about these kind of things, which I find it difficult to understand at this point how we can not be aware of what's going on. I mean, as far as the climate goes, I find it too. But then I've made a choice to read about it. I've made a choice to kind of try to make some changes in my life. And there are other choices. There are other choices which say, I don't want to talk about it and I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
And then there's a grey area in the middle where people want to talk about it but don't know how to or don't know where to.
Yeah. And sometimes someone needs to hear about an idea like 3 times before they think it's normal. Like, okay, so somebody hears that you've got a cargo bike. They then find out that someone down the road has got a cargo bike. They then see a cargo bike on the road. That's the point at which they go, oh, actually, maybe that's a possibility for my life. So even when we're not necessarily going, let's talk about climate change, but we're just incidentally mentioning the things that we are doing, not in a judgmental way, just like, oh yeah, I'm just going, I need a dress for Friday night, so I'm going to pop back down the charity shops on Beckenham High Street and see if there's anything gorgeous in there. Otherwise, I'm going to borrow something off my sister. Like that conversation suddenly means that those 3 women or 3 men you talk to in that conversation are just like, oh, that's normal, is it? Oh, you know, oh, that's, you know, I've heard, like, not just from that one conversation, but because they will have heard about it through different ways. They will have seen something in the press. They will have heard another person talking about it. Someone else will have said, oh, I'm borrowing something. And like that idea of normalizing things through conversations incidentally is really powerful as well. You know, like it's kind of that nudge, that idea of that nudge thing. The more times you see something, more times, the more you think it's normal and you think it's within your realm of possibility. I think is really interesting. But I definitely agree. I think having more conversations so that the people who are worried about it and don't know what to do or feel that they're alone, like I did actually initially, realize that they're not alone. I think that's really important. And also the people who are thinking of making changes, if they hear the things that we're doing in a non-judgmental way, not that you're saying, oh, you should be cycling, but that, oh yeah, I'll be there in about 20 minutes because I'm just cycling over, or, I'm going to just go and pop by this place to get, incidentally. I think that's really powerful. But then the other element, which you guys picked up on around using your skills, I think a lot of people are like, oh God, how can I use my skills to address climate change? And I think Paul's done something which is like really obviously using his skills by writing a piece that can then inspire other people and get conversation going, get people empathizing in a different way, which is really powerful. And I've used my skills as maybe being a kind of a problem solver, an organizer, as a lawyer, to set up a charity and try and create a model with amazing other people. But the only way that I've achieved that is from other men and women, mostly parents, if I'm honest, from the community coming forward and going, I really want to do something powerful. I know that on my own, I can only achieve X, but if I collaborate with you guys, to create this hub, to try and make a blueprint for the country, to try and talk to people wider in Southeast London, to make it more inclusive and accessible, then I know that I will be having a massive impact. And so people, I've got mums who are graphic, that I know there are people who are dealing with illness in their lives, who are single parents, who are dealing with being out of work, and they're still going, I want to do something. And they're using their professional skills. So they're going, okay, I'm a graphic designer. How can I help either Greener and Cleaner or Friends of the Earth or, a local community project around the environment? How can I help it? I'm a gardener. How can I help? I am a electrician. How can I help? I am a brand consultant. I am an advertising creative. I am a illustrator, and I'm a management consultant. I'm an accountant. I'm a lawyer. I'm a mum who's been working in the PTA and organizing events the last 7 years of my life. And all of those skills are so powerful for growing, have been so powerful to grow what we've done from a tiny community group to a charity. And even now going forward, like we had somebody who's joined us recently who is an amazing pitch writer and storyteller. And someone else who's helping us, a new person to help us with graphic design. We always need, not just us, but any kind of community group or charity trying to do anything around the environment always needs help from people who've got skills, and whether that is their skills from their home lives or whether it's their professional skills. And that's a really good way that you can maximize your impact, that you can drive change. I mean, Paul himself is working with us, doing amazing things, but also like using his voice and his sort of storytelling with us around our fundraising, but also, we're hoping to collaborate perhaps around his monologue. And I just think it's interesting for people to think about what they can do in their own lives. And if they want to have bigger impact in their community, to be assured that you will have skills that people will value and be desperately grateful for, because no charity or community group can rely solely on one graphic designer, solely on one person who's got HR experience. They need a pool of people who are willing to give a bit of time here and there. And great, if you want to do 4 hours a week, 10 hours a week, fantastic. But if you can give an hour or two a month, that is really valuable too.
There's so much there. I'm going to have to draw our conversation to a close. I always hate doing, because we could go on for hours and hours. There'll be so much great content coming out. Paul, you are certainly taking a lot of action just to sort of write that assumption.
Oh, yes,
that you would say.
Yes,
you
definitely
could go
are.
away from this and believe in that, please. That would be a good start.
I will.
So thank you both so much. There's so much great content there, inspiration for parents and how just to get started, how to avoid judgment, all these things we talked about. If people want to find out more about you, so Parisa, from your example, if people want to find out more about Greener and Cleaner, where can they find you?
So we've got a website that's greenerandcleaner.co.uk, and we also have a very popular Facebook group, which is Greener and Cleaner. I think it's called Bromley and Beyond. But if you put in Greener and Cleaner into Facebook or into Twitter or into Instagram, and obviously our website, you will find us.
And if you happen to be in Bromley Glades Shopping Centre,
yes,
as I am most weekends, you'll also find Greener and Cleaner there.
Upstairs next to Waterstones in the Glades, Bromley, yes.
And Paul, about you, if anyone wants to sort of find out more about your action, inspired by your action.
Well, I don't really get involved in social media, but I am on Twitter. I lurk on Twitter.
Don't we all?
So I can be found on Twitter if anybody wants to get in contact for any reason, or just flag me down while I'm going past on my bike.
Yeah. Oh, if anyone has any questions after this listen to the episode, then by all means get in touch with me, and I can always field questions to Paul and to Parisa.
And we can always, we're hoping to collaborate with Paul on his amazing monologue, and do something wonderful with that. So if you're interested in sort of being on the list of people we contact about it, it's probably going to be quite a small thing, maybe 20, 30 people perhaps, or something like that. We'll talk about it and work it out. But if you want to get in touch with Aisha, then she can pass on your details. And
perfect.
That's a few months' time, obviously, but I think it's a really exciting thing to look forward to, and I'm really, really blown away by it. So I'm sure everyone else will be as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much both. Have a wonderful rest of day in the sunshine, and thank you again.
You too. Thanks very much.
Thank you both.
To work with me, find out more at aishamurray.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out my free resources and quizzes at aishamurray.com/resources.